Hello ladies and gentlemen, this doesn't actually require that much of an introduction. This is an excerpt from when Johnny Depp's team took over, asking questions again, kind of following up from the cross-examination, and they start addressing Paul Bettany's text messages. Now there was some stuff previous to this, but it's not that relevant, and that was just explaining that it's dark humour, it's very much Monty Python-esque, that sort of thing, which is it's very British humour. That sort of stuff, and even the whole burner witch thing, that's actually a line of dialogue from Monty Python. But then he goes on, Johnny Depp goes on to detail what the headline is basically a moment where Amber Heard actually made Paul Bettany's son burst into tears by being rude to not only his father but also the boy as well, and he proceeded to walk off because he was upset. And Johnny Depp asked her to leave. So if you appreciate the highlights and the kind of relevant bits and pieces of these videos, please do hit thumbs up, please do hit subscribe, and please do share this video. Thanks so much. Leave your thoughts down below. Take care.
Mr. Depp, during your cross-examination, Mr. Rottenborn showed you a number of text messages between you and Paul Bettany. Do you remember that?
I do.
Could you please explain to the jury what your relationship with Mr. Bettany is?
Mr. Bettany and I had, we'd met while I was making a film called The Tourist in Venice, and we were, it was an instant connection. He's born and bred in the UK and has that English sort of dry, kind of obtuse, abstract sense of humor, and that was one of the things that we connected on. Is taking, even if it was a difficult or unpleasant situation, we would, do our best to deal with it with humor, as opposed to just a constant complaint or whining or anything of that nature. We dealt with it with humor, albeit sometimes as these are private texts that have been, there was a lot of in context. It's important to know that none of it was ever intended to be real, and the language that's used, which I am ashamed that that has to be spread on the world like peanut butter. For example, the text that is about burning Ms. Heard it's directly from Monty Python in the sketch about burning witches and then drowning the witches. This is a film that we'd all watched when we were 10, and it's just irreverent and abstract humor. That's what we were referring to in those texts.
The text message that you just referenced, other than Mr. Bettany, who else saw that text message at the time that it was sent?
No one. Of course not.
Based on your own observations, how would you describe Mr. Bettany's relationship with Ms. Heard while you and Ms. Heard were together?
Abominable.
Why was that?
Ms. Heard despised Mr. Bettany mainly because we had become such close friends, and for her, he was a threat, and would take me away from her with regard to if Paul Bettany was getting the attention from me. That was a showstopper. It would cause all kinds of unpleasantries, to the point of where when we were on the island with Mr. Bettany, his wife, and his 4 children, Ms. Heard and Mr. Bettany got into some debate over lunch, and I just remember that whenever Mr. Bettany tried to make a point, she would talk over him, and then it started to get quite rude. She got mean, and she got loud, and then I believe it was his 18-year-old boy who was getting ready to go to a very bright, brilliant kid. He entered the conversation because this was something to do with what he'd studied in school, and he knew quite a lot about it, and he voiced his opinion, and Ms. Heard demeaned that young man to the point of where he burst into tears and walked away. And it was at that point that I had spoken to Ms. Heard and said, that's just unacceptable. That behavior is unacceptable. You have no right to demean that boy. You cannot always be right. You should try being wrong sometime, because you might learn something. And then I asked her to, I thought it was best that she leave the island.